Okay. Next we have on the agenda, we have Eastland Partners for the proposed multifamily workforce development reserve at Ashworth Hill and Blaker Street. And I think before we get started, what I'd like to do is have Eastland Partners go over possibly some of the summarize some of the questions that we had here of impact to the town, and only to what our responsibilities are as the Board of Selectmen. Any other questions should be directed to the planning board. Clay, would you please?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Clay Williams. I work in planning and sustainability for Eastland Partners. Let me just get this queued up here. Great. So we came before you 2 meetings ago to present a municipal impact analysis presentation. We have increased our proposal from 250 homes to 320 in the community. My methodology in this presentation has not changed, only the number of units that these multipliers are being multiplied by. So here is our new breakdown of bedrooms. We have 32 3-bedroom units, 160 2-bedroom units, and 128 1-bedrooms, adding up to 320. I'm a little frozen here, hold on. There we go. Okay. So here are the differences in our site plan. With this new proposal, we're not impacting any new wetlands. There's really an indistinguishable change to the site. You can see the little, okay, I guess not. The blue circles on the right-hand side show where new buildings have been placed to get to 320 units. Being slow here, hold on. So why does 320 homes make sense for this site? First of all, there's more revenue to the town. The increase in revenue is larger by percentage than the number of new homes in the community. We're taking advantage of existing infrastructure. That stoplight put in place was previously there for over 350 homes from the previous development proposal back in 2009. Like I said, we have minor changes to impervious surfaces, and we still don't impact any wetlands. In terms of the 40B law in Massachusetts, 320 homes in this community will bring Auburn right below the mandated minimum 10%. You'll be at 9.9. Other than Worcester in central Massachusetts, basically no other town is close to meeting this, so that would set a really positive precedent. And then lastly, it allows us to do more for the town. It helps the economic feasibility of a water connection that we have talked about at the Development Coordination Group meeting and at the previous proposal. So with all of my data concerning school children and things like that, nothing has changed. We've increased from 52 to 67. The new total cost would be $550,000. As I said before, education is changing. In terms of traffic, nothing has changed. We've already projected for this number of units. All of the infrastructure is still owned by the community. Nothing will change there. So in terms of our new site plan, there's the fire station up in the right-hand corner. Will be managed by Wingate Properties. Nothing's changed there. Local preference is a way to keep Auburn residents in this community. Through review of some of the police blotter calls, most of the calls that happened were focused on commercial businesses, and other studies also confirm this. The same cost estimate limitations are here. The residential share of property taxes is 67%, so 33% would come from the commercial sources in town. So here are our updated costs for police, fire, and DPW. We are multiplying by 320 units now instead of 250. Through discussion with Fire Chief Stephen Coleman, we talked about the fact that the ambulance receipts in town actually show that more than 67% of the cost is borne by residences. So to account for that, I used 100% as that efficiency adjustment. Those just show how different services change with new housing. And then here's the real benefit to the town. It brings your mandated minimum of subsidized housing basically right up to that 10%. The same benefits are still realized. You'll be in compliance for a period of years. There'll be more green space in town. We've already mentioned enough about the housing crisis. So here's our figure for auto excise taxes. You're looking at just under $200,000. Real estate taxes have increased to just under $1.2 million. Revenues are at $14,000 for sewer. When you total up all of these costs, you get $792,000, just below $800. Stabilized revenue is $1.4 million. One-time sources, which come from building permits and connection fees, are just over $650. At the end of the day, the town can expect revenues in excess of $614,000 every year. A lot of jobs and a lot of economic contributions are supported here. The in and outflow of Auburn has already been covered. Conventional zoning, we already talked about too. This site could support just about 40 homes, which would cover just about the same impact with significantly less revenue. So now we're getting to a little bit of the construction schedule, which basically just shows how the site is going to work moving forward. At the end of the day, we're anticipating full occupancy by January of 2023. It'll be phased in 3 sections with about 100 units each. And that's basically the end of how the changes in terms of the unit number will impact the town of Auburn. And now Logan is going to talk about the local initiative project.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Right? That was good. I think it was about 6.5 minutes. My goal tonight, I'll keep it brief. I think that it may be most productive. I've kind of read a couple pages here quickly into the record. Basically outlines what the local initiative program, LIP as it's called, and I think it gives everyone a good idea. Then I'll get this information to you, after tonight's meeting. So here we go. Don't critique my reading skills. Local Initiative Program, LIP, is a state program that encourages the creation of affordable housing by providing technical assistance to communities and developers who are working together to create affordable rental opportunities. LIP was established by the legislature in 1990 in response to a report by a special legislative commission which found that state law defined low moderate income housing as any housing subsidized by federal or state government under any program to assist the construction of affordable housing. This definition had previously been interpreted to mean financial subsidies only. Cities and towns had little incentive to undertake housing initiatives which did not require direct state or federal assistance, but which are otherwise within the intent of MGL Chapter 40B. LIP allows the Department of Housing and Community Development to provide technical assistance that qualifies as a subsidy. The LIP may also issue a site eligibility letter for a project, a prerequisite for a developer to apply for a comprehensive permit. That's what we would be doing in this situation. Unlike conventional housing subsidy programs in which a state or federal agency must approve every aspect of financing, design, and construction, LIP allows most of these decisions to be made by the municipality. LIP regulations and guidelines address those program components that must be reviewed and approved by DHCD. For example, incomes of households served, fair marketing, profit limitation, and establishing long-term affordability for the units which are built. So with all that said, that's what kind of the picture of what the local initiative program is. So the second part, how it works. Developers seeking to build single or multifamily homes, condos, or apartments where a certain percentage of the units are proposed to be affordable work with town officials to obtain approval. Such units must serve households below 80% of the area median income. The units must be subject to use restrictions to ensure that they remain in a community's affordable housing stock, and must be sold or rented on a fair and open basis. DHCD provides technical support to both the town and the developer. If a development cannot be built under existing zoning, the developer may seek a comprehensive permit allowing the development to be built at a higher density than allowed under existing zoning. LIP projects are subject to profit limitations. For homeownership projects, profit and developer fees to all partners and owners are limited to no more than 20% of the total development costs. For rental projects, the LIP regulatory agreement signed by the community, developer, and DHCD limits distribution of return to all partners and legal and beneficial owners to a maximum of 10% equity per year. That's it in a nutshell. Ultimately what we do is it's a broad brush starting out. This makes sense. We believe we can support it. We come together, fill out the DHCD application. We sign it. You as the highest elected officials in the community sign it. That then goes to DHCD for approval, which starts the process moving forward. Then, once we have DHCD approval, which it technically they use the word subsidy, DHCD gives us approval back in the form of the subsidy, which is typically called a site letter, which that allows us then to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and start the full permitting process. Now, in the comprehensive permit program, everything is kind of funneled through the ZBA. All other boards are still involved. All other boards still have comment and input in the process, yet it is kind of orchestrated and handled through the Zoning Board of Appeals. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Logan. I guess one question I have is the DHC, that seems to be your go-to people for permitting. Your construction schedule says permits should be by the end of the first quarter of 2020. When do you foresee this board receiving the permits for signature?
Well, as the process goes, what happens actually is we work a little more, and it basically is a broad brush. It's not a situation at this level where it's going to be the approval of where the sewer line's going to be and exactly where the lot layout is and how far this sits back from that and all those technical things. At this level, what we do is it's really kind of the broad brush. We think this is good for the community. It has potential. It can help us. We need the housing. We believe it's a great location for this type of housing. We think it has other benefits for us. It's really moving forward and signing that application. And as far as your involvement, as I say, once that's done, then it moves to DHCD where they do their review process, make sure everything is in order, copacetic and all. And then they come back and then they issue their site approval letter, That comes back to us. That then allows us to make application to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and that's when the formal permitting process starts here in the community.
Great, thank you. Board members, Mrs. Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is in regards to local preference. So it's my understanding that you're now looking at 320 units, and of those 320 units, the numbers you gave us, we have 25% that are considered the affordable apartments, right? So that would give us 80 units. Of those 80 units, the project allows for up to 70% of those 80 units. So now we're down to 56% of those units given local preference. 70 units.
You got me with the math.
Okay, so just for this discussion purpose, just let's assume I'm right.
Okay.
Just for this discussion purpose. So now we have 56 units, because I absolutely agree, we need affordable housing in Auburn, but we also need affordable housing for people who we want to, who grew up in Auburn, who are working in Auburn, who want to stay in Auburn, who can't afford affordable apartments, young families, whatever, seniors who are leaving their homes that they raise their children in and are now looking for affordable housing. So those, and this is a significant impact on the town of Auburn. Like, we have to acknowledge that it's a significant impact. So I'm asking for the Auburn residents who are looking for affordable housing. So now, go back to my math, 56 units out of 320 would be designated for Auburn preference. But of that Auburn preference, you have 4 categories. One is current residents, so that's a yes, current residents. The other 3 categories are not Auburn residents. Households with children attending the schools, so that's somebody who maybe got in the lottery in the school system, living in another community, so now they get preference, but they're not Auburn residents. Employees of local businesses, we know a lot of them are not Auburn residents, so again, we're not giving Auburn preference. Municipal employees, although the manager certainly, looks at Auburn residents for employability first, there are many municipal employees who are not Auburn residents. And then back to the 4th category, which is current residents. So just for the sake of math, you take those 4 categories and you divide it further by 4, you're down to 16 units for Auburn residents, hypothetically. So my question is, are you willing to look at additional units for Auburn preference?
Well, one of the things, this is what we get to do together. The local preference is it's not black and white, kind of as you say. Say, for example, if we put together a group and say a couple of the members here on the board, yourself.
Excuse me, Logan, would you speak into the microphone, please?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So a couple of us got together and we put together a committee and we figure out how do we want to do this. And so we come up with the different things that we want. You don't have to have them all, and there is flexibility within it. I don't want to sound vague here, but then what happens is, say for example, you have Auburn residents that also work in town, that also, or say that could be your first lottery, and all those people, could be in it. But then the next one would be maybe they work in town, but they don't live here. What happens is, and I'm probably not saying this real well, there's actually multiple bites at the apple, if you will. So as you sign up, and then even beyond that, if a lot of Auburn residents came out and they didn't fall in the local preference or they didn't get in one of the lotteries, they're also still in the general, which would be, the whole picture. In our experience, when I've done it in the past, I would say in more often than not, it's not a case of having enough. It's more of getting the outreach out there to get people to know about us and reach out, because they're available. And common sense tells you you'd rather have, as a business person, let's say, I'd rather have people I know and people are local than somebody I don't, if that makes any sense. So, our goal would be to work that as much as we can.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I just, this is an important thing. I think it's probably, I'm going to assume important. We've had lengthy discussions about this, and the concern is that Auburn residents do not have housing. And I just, you look at these numbers and you look at these presentations and you say, allows up to 70% local preference. I just want to be clear that it's 70% of the 25%, which is of that number 320. So we're now looking at 56 units, which are given local preference out of 320. So I'm hoping that's something, whether it's a subcommittee that's formed or whatever, that's something that you'll give serious consideration to.
I'd love to.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Berthium.
In the presentation, it was mentioned of the fire station, and being that there was discussion with the chief, and seeing that the chief is here, would it be possible to have him come up and kind of give his views on the, on the impact and on the fire station part of it?
I'll refer to the town manager.
And some of the impact figures.
We could certainly invite the chief up. I do want to be clear that a lot of these impacts, they were brought to the attention of the DCG group, and it was discussed amongst the department heads. Some input was given back to Eastland Partners to come up with the numbers, so I'm sure the chief can speak to that. But I do want to be clear, just to make sure everyone understands, the impacts that you see here tonight are truly estimates. There is no, I think we're trying to do the best we can to estimate the impacts. We're trying to do the best we can to have Eastland estimate the impacts for us, because we keep asking for that, but they will be based upon whomever moves into these units, and that's where we're going to you won't know how many children are going to move in. You can estimate it based on industry standards, you can estimate the impacts on police and fire, but I think we all need to recognize the impacts could be far greater or they could be less. It really all depends on who actually signs those leases, and it's going to be, I assume it will be fluctuating, because these are rental units, these are not ownership units, so that's constantly going to change. So I'm sure the chief is happy to speak to it, but I just want to make sure everyone knows we're grappling with this as well, trying to look at these numbers and say that's a given snapshot in time, but that snapshot is going to change given different points in time.
Welcome, Chief.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So as far as the impacts, I can't speak, and I won't speak to the impacts on the police department, but certainly on the fire side, as Mrs. Goodrich just mentioned, this is a significant project for the town of Auburn. I will say before I start, it is a project that I support. I think that housing is much needed in the community, so I think overall it's a good plan and a good project that's been laid out. But there are certainly going to be impacts to the fire rescue department. Basically what we do when any project comes into community, whether it's this residential housing project, we've already sort of run the numbers on the Mary D. Stone School and the property on Vinyl Street, we're able to derive some pretty close estimates on call volume based on like facilities that we already have within the community and call volume, statistical call volume that we respond to on an annual basis. And that pretty much stays consistent with really all of the housing units that we have in town. So we're able to derive some pretty close statistical data based on like properties. But the other thing that we do is we reach out to communities that have similar projects, like the town of Holden, which actually Eastland Partners has a Holden project, smaller in scale in terms of the number of units. But when you're talking about estimating call volume, you still look at that, and then you're able to project it based on our call volume. So I worked closely with Clay in coming up what the estimated call volume numbers were. We were in agreement on what those were. So I estimate that we will have an impact of about 2.5% increase in our call volume when the complex is fully developed in that 3-year period, and that's going to translate to about 75 to 100 calls a year. And again, when you look at communities like Holden, Westboro that have similar call volumes, there are industry standard calculations that you use based on the number of units, based on percentage of the call volume in those communities. So easily we are going to be in that 75 to 100 calls a year range. So it translates, roughly to about 1 every 4 days. Certainly over the construction period, there's going to be impacts to not only our department, but DDIS when we're talking about the building inspector and the fire prevention division. But then once the buildings are actually built out, although DDIS, not that they go away completely, but because of these are rental properties of 5 or more, these are also going to require annual inspections from the fire prevention division. So there's going to be long-term impacts, for the department as well. So just to clarify one thing that Clay said, and he might have misunderstood what I said relative to the ambulance receipts. The fact that we have ambulance receipts that contribute to our budget, it actually does not mean the taxpayers are paying more. It means the taxpayers are paying less in the budget because our budget is offset by about $900,000 a year. So the taxpayers are actually paying less from the levy as compared to other departments, not more. I just wanted to make that clarification. But like I said, just to reiterate, it is a good project, but it's a large project, and it will have an impact not only in call volume but long-term inspectional services.
Yes, Mr. Berthium.
And if between the three of you, if you could tell me a little bit more about, is it a private fire station that you're proposing on the property? Or?
Mr. Berthium, I think he's just pointing out the location of the West Street Fire Station on the map.
It looked like it was on the land when...
He's correct. It is the West Street Fire Station. I just wanted to show that there's very close proximity.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm sorry for that confusion.
Are there any further questions? Mrs. Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one, through you to the town manager. When will this information be brought to the school committee superintendent, and will they make the same presentation? This, I believe, will, from what I've heard from school committee members, is they're already at max, so they're concerned about additional classrooms, additional teachers. So I'm just wondering when this presentation will be made to them and how they can begin to prepare for this.
Through the chair, I can't speak for the school committee. I don't know how they're going to schedule, but I can tell you that they have had much discussion about this already. The school superintendent and I are in touch on this project. I, early on in this process, recommended that Eastland Partners meet with Dr. Brunel to go over the impact numbers and the data and the mechanism for calculating that. So the school committee has been aware. Dr. Brunel has been keeping them aware at their meetings. Most recently, their last meeting, she did mention to the school committee that they were coming back this evening with some revised information on the increased number of units. We did not have this presentation available to us until I believe we got this last Tuesday or Wednesday, which is right when I sent it to the board. So prior to it becoming public with the board, it was not handed to the school committee, but they have been verbally told what the increased numbers are and had also been updated after DCG. I did ask Dr. Brunel if she was willing to send someone to DCG or attend herself. So we don't normally have someone from the school department there, but we thought the magnitude of this project really demanded that we have someone from the school department be there. So they were at the DCG meeting. They did hear all about this, and Dr. Brunel shared most of that data already with the school committee. I believe they were waiting to get more information from this evening to see what was going to be presented as far as what the LIP process is. And I believe their questions, my understanding is their questions are also what type of role does the Board of Selectmen play in the negotiation of any potential impacts. Any kind of mitigation, what types of wish lists, so to speak, can we submit? We have reached out to the school committee and all the department heads to start gathering information that we feel will be impacts on the departments and starting to put together a list of things that we feel might be worth a discussion that we want to present to the board for your consideration. So we have kept the school department in the loop. I don't know when the school committee is next meeting, but I know Dr. Brunel has kept them in the loop right along.
But they'll have this presentation will be sent to them or to the superintendent.
Well, the superintendent called me this morning just to make sure it was still on the agenda, so she's already aware, and this goes on, it becomes public immediately.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. LaLiberty.
Through the chair, I was looking at the difference between the site plans, and I didn't see anything immediately about any increases in parking for the site, adding in an additional 100 units. I was just wondering if there was any that I'm just not seeing, or what the plan is there, if there are any thoughts that there might.
It feels the same way for me, but we maintained the parking ratios, so the parking quantity did go up to maintain the same ratio effectively as what it had with the smaller number of units.
Thank you.
Through the chair, my understanding was it was 1.5 cars per unit was what you calculated on your estimates for the excise taxes, so I'm assuming you use that for parking as well.
It's actually 1.7 and change is what we have available.
Okay, so you were conservative then in your estimates on the auto excise taxes at 1.5? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else? Yes, Mr. Berthium.
Back a couple meetings ago when you did a presentation, I had actually said, if was there any possibility of expanding and having a couple of buildings with more floors with an elevator so that we could get more senior accessible units. And I just wonder, it sounds to me like with the units that you added, you stayed with the 3-floor, 3-story.
We did, and we looked into it and talked to our architects, planners, and just overall design group, and for the we were cautioned somewhat against it because it's bordering on, we're pretty suburban here, and once you start going to 5 stories, it starts becoming kind of an urban thing, and it gets real tall. Plus, the way we have 96 of the total are accessible. So it's a fair number.
Thank you.
Mr. LaLiberty.
Combining those 2 points on parking and accessibility, I did find a couple of the lots that would have been added to bring up the numbers. One of them seems to be somewhat far away from the building, so I'm just wondering if any residents that sign up to be or live in the housing, if they'll have any preference, either handicap spots closer to their specific building, or how that would all be sorted out.
Absolutely. I don't know how they do it, but in our other communities and experience, somebody sits and figures out the walking distance and kind of assign spaces, and then there is a fair bit of flexibility within that. Not everybody that has a handicap, or not everybody has a handicap placard that kind of needs one. So, definitely that's a typical thing where that's taken into consideration.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. Yes, Ms. Jacobson.
I just, if I may, I just have a couple of questions as well. So first of all, I want to thank you because we've been asking questions for months, and you've both been very responsive, and we appreciate it. And I know we have shared some of the questions, overshared all of the questions that the board has received from residents, as well as anything that we've received from residents with Eastland Partners. So I thank you for addressing those as well. I do have a couple questions more for the benefit of the board and for town administration. So just, can you summarize for us, what is the benefit of the Board of Selectmen voting to approve of entering into an LIP with the developer versus if the board doesn't go into an LIP, what would happen? And then the second thing is, let's assume the board then decides to take that vote. What is the process for that? When do they get the draft application? And when do we start the next phase, and what is that next phase?
Let me start with, as you say, first with what does the community get? As Doreen mentioned earlier, we work through things like local preference. You mentioned, wish list of different things that we may be able to do in and around the community, the water system being a huge one. So, it's an opportunity, as it says, to kind of be more of a partnership, because we sign up for this together and we start off, and if the partnership is going south, what happens? The partnership breaks up. So, it's an opportunity to work together. The community can, frankly, how do you say, can get more than if it was a situation where, the typical 40B where we go directly to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And frankly, it just feels better. It's, I was thinking about a saying, I'm sure all of you have heard, before, and I might have even said it here, once before. If not here, where? If not now, when? I'm clearly, the developer, I'm biased, but at the same time, I can be pretty objective, and I've been in the development game for 30 years. I've never, ever found a site that had everything that this has going for it. I take that and then look at, the current housing situation that we all know exists today in the Commonwealth, in Auburn and every community around us. And then I add that, and I look at the community, and it's kind of tough for me. Here I am wanting to promote my development, but I also look at there's been many times. We see land opportunities every day. And you'd be surprised how often, with a tough piece of property or poorly located or whatever it happens to be, the seller or the broker, they'll say, well, yeah, you can do a 40B. And there's that attitude out there where, people come in and they take sites that should never be touched, and they try and push these 40Bs through in just plain bad locations. Well, the way the law is and the way it's kind of written, because the quote-unquote need, as it says in the statute, is such that if the town hasn't met that 10% requirement, in that case, that developer has a lot more power to push something through. And in what we're talking about here, because the SJC decided years ago that when you do a rental development, that all the units count, as Clay said and as his presentation shows, this development, together with the two school developments, literally puts Auburn at that 10% mark. Then, whatever comes along in the future, the community has the ability to say no, or not there, but over there, or whatever happens to be. That's a big deal, I would think. So I hope I answered that question. As far as the process goes, as I mentioned earlier, the next step is we bring in our completed application, the DHCD application. I actually brought along, you brought blank? Oh, you did? Okay. I can get them to you, Julie. It's actually is on the DHCD website. We'll have ours to you, I would say, within the next 10 days. And with that application, it will have all the meat and potatoes, essentially what you've seen of what the development is, the numbers, the unit counts, the projected rents, the financial model as far as the projected expenses, resumes on all of us, from us to the architect to the engineer, the whole development team. It'll have the resume for Wingate Management and, just the full numbers of how things will look. That will get to you. You'll get a chance to absorb it. We'll come in, we'll answer questions. And, at that point, we're going to be at that place, I would say, where it's going to be time to decide, does this make sense for Auburn to move forward with that? If so, that's the time when we pick the time, place, sign the application, and as I mentioned earlier, we sign it together, then that application goes to Boston, to DHCD. They do their approval process, which takes 30 to 45 days. In that period, we think everything's moving along. We get ourselves all ready to go. It comes back out, and then we make application to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Through the chair, if I can.
Please.
Thank you very much. So just for looking at the timing of this, so the Board of Selectmen next meets in September, I believe September 9th. So if we had the application in the next 10 days, that would be great, because I'd like the opportunity to then share it with the Board of Selectmen so they can at least review it prior to the 9th. And I think we've talked about it before, and my recommendation to the board would be not to take a vote on the 9th, because I think you need the opportunity to get the application, look at it, and have one more opportunity to ask more questions and probably vote more toward the end of September at the following meeting on that.
Be the 23rd?
Which would be the 23rd.
23rd.
And I know we had asked Mr. Huffman and his team if that would be acceptable to them. So given the schedule, is that still a doable schedule?
I think that's more than fair, because we know we have still a fair bit of information to get to you. I want you to have this information, have plenty of time to review it and absorb it. It's a lot to ask, so I want you to have all of this. My hope would be, as you and I had talked way back when, is we'll get our information together. We'll be prepared to come in on the 9th. Hopefully by the 23rd, we'll be at a place where, everybody can feel comfortable, moving forward.
Okay, and through the chair, I just feel that, and I know I appreciate you putting up with me, but I've been a little persistent about getting information ahead of time, because I want to make sure you have it for as long of a period as you can before you have to make any decision. So I guess my other question is, if for any reason we can't get it within that 10 days, I don't want to, even recommend to the board that you commit to that. You still should, I would recommend you still look at it again on the 9th, but just make sure that you have plenty of time to absorb the material. And I guess my question is, at what point does the town or does the board have the discussions with you about impact mitigation? Are there any components of the application once we get it that are negotiable, i.e., I'll just throw out, is it the number of units are negotiable? Is it the schedule that's negotiable? Is it,
Somebody told
do we
me
jump
long
into
ago
this?
that everything in life is negotiable. So, and I would say, Julie, sooner the better. And, because I'm assuming some of these things are going to have financial impacts.
Correct.
And, we, on our end, we'll need time to plug that into, kind of the equation and all, depending what those things are. So I would say that if the moment you have thoughts, or of any of you of the board, if you have thoughts or ideas, please feel free to reach out and email or a phone call, whatever, and let's kind of run it up the flagpole, as they say.
So through the chair, one more question then. Would the town and the Board of Selectmen have the opportunity to enter into a memorandum of agreement, or is all that done through the LIP application itself? So how do we formalize the agreement that ultimately gets negotiated with the impacts on the project? Does it become an attachment to the LIP? Is it a separate legal document?
I would say, let me get you the application and let's look at that. And, that's when we sit down and, we figure out what we need, what the town needs to be comfortable and all, as far as memorandum of understanding, whatever that requires.
Okay, because
absolutely.
My question on that is, should it take a little longer to get that done? If there's an additional legal instrumentation that we need to put together, I want to make sure we have the time to get it done appropriately, reviewed by town council, et cetera.
Right.
Okay.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Anything
Thank you
else?
so much.
Well, thank you for coming in tonight and presenting that information to us, and I think we've got a little bit better idea of, timeline and what is expected of us. And we thank you very, very much, and we will be in touch with you if there are further questions so that we can get them all answered.
Great. Thanks
Thank you
again,
for coming in
everyone.
tonight. Thank you very much.
Good night. Thanks.
Okay. Next, we have, there's no communications. We have,
There's a resident with her hand up.
oh, I'm beg your pardon. Sorry. Yes, please come forward and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Eileen Lassard. I live at 11 Blaker Street, which is the corner of Albert and Blaker. And I have been exposed to the LIP program before. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. When I hear the term, broad brush, I'm thinking that details are going to get swept under the carpet, such as the traffic pattern. How are fire trucks going to get up to those apartments? Right now, the traffic on the streets can only accommodate a fire truck without any traffic. So I do have a major concern about how the traffic is going to be handled, especially with the additional units. Because if they aren't allowing for additional traffic or changing their figures from their initial assessment, when there was 250 units, either those figures were flawed or these figures are flawed. Something's got to give there. And I'm very concerned about the safety of the people who would rent there, whether they be elderly or children, and getting to them in an emergency. Because when it snows, not even one, everybody has to use everybody's driveway to get past each other. There's not room for 2 cars, never mind a fire engine or ambulance facilities. So I am very concerned about that.
Mrs. Lassard, have you had a chance to go to the planning board meeting and voice those opinions or concerns? Mm-hmm. And have you had any response?
Well, they're definitely concerned, and I'm afraid that they didn't receive the respect from Eastland that I thought they deserved.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm very, very much concerned about it. In fact, just 3 weeks ago, the telephone pole number 8 at the corner of Albert and Blaker was hit again. It's been hit multiple times. People can't make that corner.
Hit again by what?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It was splintered when I woke up. It usually happens at night.
Okay.
So the speed limit is supposed to be 30, but it's not 30 there.
Okay, that's, I appreciate you coming forward and making comment on your concerns. This is definitely something that's got to go back to the planning board. And to, also to the ZBA, yes, on the final presentation for the application. And I think that what we should do is be sure that the planning board is made aware of your concerns and that you approach them and be sure that it's forward along and they follow up along with, some answers to your questions.
And currently at Albert and Blaker, there is a stop sign that was put up there by Eastland, so it's not a city-sanctioned stop sign, but I'd also like to see how that traffic pattern's going to be handled too. And again, I know that's for a different forum.
Okay.
And at what point do we get to see the plans that you have in your hands tonight? Is that available to the public?
This, the proposal, the presentation we had tonight?
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be posted tomorrow.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for coming forward. Okay.